Hello everybody, we got some gentle rain in the background, but hopefully it won't be too distracting. Today, benchmark wise, we're looking at the Asus ROG Ally again, and we're going to be testing Fortnite. Our ultimate goal is going to be to see if we can, at 10, but most likely 15 watts, get any of the new Unreal Engine 5 features up and running at a decent frame rate. Now, will we be able to do that if we plug into the wall and go maximum 30 watt mode, boost everything? Absolutely. But can we do it portably? What can we get out of this device portably at 720p or 1080p that's still at a decent frame rate and still looks good? Let's find out. Alright, so here we are in the settings. We have it set to 720p. We're going to be starting with 10 watts. We have everything set to medium, except of course we have Nanite and Lumen turned on. So we have Lumen to high because that's the lowest setting that there is of Lumen. If you go anything below that, it's just ambient occlusion. And we also have Nanite on. So that's right here, Nanite virtualized geometry. See both those settings, and the rest we have set to medium. Anti-aliasing is just at TAA. We got no upscaling of any kind. We just want to see what this device can do, if anything, at 10 watts with these settings. With that, let's get into the game itself. So here we are at 10 watts, 720p, all the settings we listed before, and we've been connecting to a game here for about 5 or 6 minutes. Now sometimes when you're on low settings or on lower end hardware, it can still load in eventually. It'll load in a little bit late, so we'll wait just a little bit longer here and see if it does anything. If not, we know we need to go and tweak some settings to even get these types of settings like Nanite and Lumen to run on a device like this. And here we are back again, having bumped the wattage up to 15 watts. And still, it doesn't appear that we are able to actually load into the map itself. So now we know the parameters of what we're working with here, that we probably can't have Nanite and Lumen both on, or at least not both on at medium settings. So from here we're going back to the drawing board to see what we can get out at 10 and 15 watts. We're going to start by turning either Nanite or Lumen off. I think Lumen is going to be the one that's going to be the bigger resource hog, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll go back and we'll try just Nanite. Alright, I think this is going to be a fairly short video. We just tried it with Nanite, and it did the same thing with the connecting, so I decided to bump the wattage up to 30 while the game was running. And we actually got into the game finally, and at least while we were dropping, we were running between 60 and 80 FPS. So I thought, well, it's working. Let's lower it down now since we're already in the game. So lowered it to 10 watts immediately. Ideally, probably not the smartest move. The game crashed immediately. So it's clear that at the lower wattages, the 10 and 15 watts, that Lumen and Nanite do not want to run on this machine. But with that in regards, let's pump the other settings up as high as we can to see what we can get. And then at the end, we'll do 30 watts to see what we can actually get out of Nanite or Lumen, or maybe both, at that highest wattage. Alright everyone, here we are in the game again at 10 watts, 720p. We bumped everything to high. So everything besides Nanite, Lumen, all that fun stuff is at high. Shadows, detail, draw distance, everything at high. As we're falling here, we're a little chunky. We're getting between like 15 and 30 FPS. We had a really bad drop there. But I think once we get to the ground, it's going to be a little bit better. Let's find out. And I'm sorry for my team. I'm not going to be helping you guys out too much. Okay, yeah, we're still kind of sitting in that between like 16 and 30 FPS range. I would say it's mostly between the 20s and 30s for the most part. You can see the FPS counter up there in the top right. But I would struggle to call this playable. It's almost the same as the Switch, really, in terms of performance, but its drops are much worse. The Switch is just like really bad all the time at like 25 FPS. but this is dropping to like 16 at the lowest. And both my teammates are dead already, so I don't have to feel bad. So let's right here then bump it to 15 watts. All right, you see down there, performance 15 watts, still at 720p. And boom, look at that. So now instead of getting 16 to like 35 FPS here, we're getting 60 to 70. If you can see that little tiny number there. Let's move around a bit and see if that stays consistent. Had a drop there to around 30, but I don't think that's going to be common. Looks like we're staying mostly between the low 50s to 60s. But this is definitely much more playable. So we see the difference that 5 watts, just 5 watts can have there. Now, I think if you wanted to, if you really wanted to run Nanite Lumen or even higher settings, some of the like ultra or extreme settings for this game, you can make a custom TDP, maybe set to like 25 or even 20 when not plugged in or when plugged in, and probably get Nanite or Lumen to run on this device without being docked and getting that steady 30 watts from your power supply. But this is way more than playable, and this is at, remember, high settings. Now just for reference, when we test Nanite and Lumen, let's bump this to 30 watts. So we have a frame of reference. Now immediately that brought us between 90 and 100 FPS. A couple drops here to around the high 70s. But you see the difference between 10 watts and 15 watts, and then doubling 15 to 30 is not as big of a difference as you might think it would be, or might like. So when you're at 15 watts, just like with the Steam Deck, you're kind of maxing the device out in terms of its performance to power consumption ratio. Doesn't mean it can't do better, but the difference between 10 watts and 15 watts can almost double its power. Oh god, I just dropped from my car to the sky. But the difference between 15 and 30 watts is maybe only like 10 to 20% depending on the game. So with that, let's try another match and see what we can do with Nanite, with Lumen, hopefully both at that 30 watt mark. Okay, and here we are with Nanite and Lumen on. Now we've loaded into the game much quicker here at the 30 watts. So if you value your loading into the game over portability, you're going to want to stay plugged in at 30 watts here. But we have Nanite on, and you can't have Lumen on by itself. You can only have Nanite or Nanite with Lumen. You can't just have Lumen. They're contingent, or I should say Lumen is contingent on Nanite. So let's see the kind of frame rate we're getting here. We left all of our settings on high, and now have Nanite and Lumen on. And the game is gorgeous, honestly, even at 720p. We're getting between 40 and 60-ish FPS here, running around the main area, some dips to the 30s. But this is definitely like console quality in terms of the frame rate, what you might expect from a PS4 Pro or an Xbox Series X. Now the graphical settings are actually probably higher. Getting a little slow down there as we jump from the bus, but that can be pretty normal. We'll see how it is once we land. As I was saying, though it is a lower resolution, all of the graphical settings are basically higher than the, I think even maybe the PS5 would be, depending on what mode you play it on. If you play it on the 120 FPS mode, definitely this is going to be looking better graphically. And we still have a lot of room to play with. Again, getting around 30 to 50 FPS. A drop here or there. I would say this is definitely playable, but not ideal. I would prefer personally to play this at higher FPS, lower settings. So we do have Nanite and Lumen on. We do have all high settings. So we can definitely bump it down to medium, even keeping Nanite and Lumen on, and probably gain a decent amount of performance. Or we could turn just Lumen off and leave Nanite on and see what we do. So let's try that. Let's go into the settings real quick while our teammates are getting shot to death. See our settings here, DirectX 12, 720 FP or 720p, everything at high. Let's try it with just Lumen off first, and then lower settings to medium as well. Okay, that gave us about a 10 or so FPS boost. You see now we're getting between 60 to 70, maybe around 60 in outside areas where there's more going on. So already there, that gave us a decent boost. Now let's go to medium settings on top of that. We'll try to do this as quick as we can for our teammates' sakes. Lower everything to medium, and that is all of it. I think I'm getting shot in the head. Nope. Alright. Now, the interesting thing is I crashed. I was actually going to say the interesting thing is that our FPS didn't change. But clearly the game just crashed. So maybe don't mess with your settings that much when you're in a match. But based on the performance increase we had, or decrease I should say, when bumping everything up too high, I think we can say we would probably have gained another 10 to 15 FPS on average from lowering things to medium there. So with Nanite and Lumen on, at 30 watts at least, you can play this game pretty comfortably if you're willing to mess with settings a little bit. Now if you do want to take this portably, Nanite and Lumen are not an option unfortunately. You're going to be want to playing at high settings or below. If you want high frame rates, I would stick with medium settings, and then if you want to bump it further from there, turn on some kind of AMD FSR2 and maybe set it to balanced. I don't think setting it to quality is very useful, and I don't think setting it to performance or ultra performance looks very good. It makes everything in the distance very blurry, and in a battle royale game where you're shooting a lot of people you see in the distance, it's not a very good setting. So, with Nanite and Lumen at 30 watts, you can run Fortnite just fine. You can easily, if you tweak settings, get 60 FPS. And without it, you easily tweak settings. You can get even high settings in Fortnite and maintain that 60 FPS at 15 watts, which I think is pretty impressive for a device like this. Let me know what you guys think about this, what you think about Fortnite on this device, or any other games you would like me to test or to check out. And until next time, have a great one.